Good afternoon, and welcome to the VACCELERATE webinars. I would like to ask
Zoe, you're not hearing.
Zoe, I think you're muted.
Thank you very much. I apologize for that. So what I was saying is, again, welcome to the VACCELERATE webinars, and please, if feasible, to keep your microphones muted while we present our VACCELERATE work. And I think that today it's a great pleasure to present a very, let's say, important study that was conducted by the VACCELERATE Site Network, which is actually predicting the next pandemic. So based on the previous WHO Blueprint report, the VACCELERATE Site Network tried in a way to approach infectious diseases experts around the world to ask for their perceived risk when it comes to the next pandemic and a few of the possible, let's say, pathogens that could fuel the next pandemic. The presenter today, actually, John, which is an active member of the core team of VACCELERATE, will present the results of this online survey. So, John, we are all ears, and I give you the floor to present to us this very, very important study. So whenever you're ready, you can start.
Thank you very much, and also thank you very much to the consortium for offering me the opportunity to present the results of this publication, and also to you all for taking this amount of time of today and join. I'm Jens Salmanton-García. I'm a postdoctoral researcher in the University of Cologne, and between other projects, I'm involved in the VACCELERATE consortium. And in this occasion, what I'm presenting is like a prediction of what could be the next pandemic pathogen based on the opinion of many of you all, and like also colleagues that haven't managed to connect in order to rank or make a ranking from the World Health Organization's blueprint for action to prevent epidemics. So I would like to introduce very, very briefly what VACCELERATE is, in case you are not aware of it. And basically, it's the largest clinical research network for vaccine trial development in Europe. And it is part of the European Commission pandemic preparedness. That's why this topic, what could be the next pandemic pathogen, it's relevant for VACCELERATE. And basically, that's somehow one of the connections. VACCELERATE has 31 partners, 18 in EU member states and 5 in EU associated countries. And this research was started from one of the different parts of the VACCELERATE structure, and it's the VACCELERATE Site Network. This VACCELERATE Site Network is a network of clinical trial units, and it's present in 39 European countries, in almost 500 sites, and basically they are sites with the capacity to perform clinical trials both in adults and pediatric population. It's open for everyone, so in case you are not registered, please feel free to do so. And one of the aspects is, but another aspect is the capacity building. This means that within the VACCELERATE Site Network, once you are members, you can benefit from educational courses like the Good Clinical Practice course or the Study Nurse course, also standard operating procedures, and also a feasibility questionnaire. So having said this, what VACCELERATE is about, and also the VACCELERATE Site Network, we move forward. And we move forward, and in this case, I'm giving you a bit of background for the reason of this whole study. Basically, the World Health Organization has a research and development blueprint for action to prevent epidemics. And in this blueprint, they identified key infectious diseases that were necessary or were relevant to prevent. Additionally, and in parallel, other international organizations like Africa CDC or CEPI made also their own lists. So basically, we are speaking about 3 lists of institutions, international institutions, mentioning certain pathogens that could be the main reason triggering a next pandemic pathogen. Why these pathogens? We will see them in the next slide. Basically, based on their transmissibility, also their infectivity, their severity, and also the evolutionary potential. And based on these lists where there is no ranking, and that's the key of the whole study and all the data we are presenting today, from VACCELERATE, we wanted to make that ranking because pandemic preparedness, it's also one of our priorities. And for that, we need some guidance and some specific targets. So here we can see a list of 25 different pathogens, mainly viruses. And in each of the columns, we see which of the pathogens appear in which list. In the African CDC, the list is larger. Then we have the CEPI one with some fewer pathogens, and the one of the World Health Organization. Based on these 3, but not only, we made our VACCELERATE list of next pandemic pathogen. You can see I have marked in yellow how in 6 pathogens there is an overlap, or actually, better said, in 5 pathogens, and then also there is overlap in disease X. In case you don't know what disease X means, basically it's somehow a more fancy way to say unknown, meaning that, well, a new pandemic will come, that's certain or somehow certain, but we don't really know which one. So basically it's a synonym, one could say that it's a synonym of unknown. So if we go more in detail to this list of 25 different pathogens, I have made these tables with the name of the pathogen, the animal or vector involved in case there is any, the transmission mode, and the mortality rate. So you can see more or less how relevant, or you can also judge how relevant they are for you. The ones marked in yellow in the column of the pathogens are the ones that have been included in our research. And additionally, in this column, it may appear a syringe. Basically, that means that in that pathogen or for that pathogen, there is a well-developed and an available vaccine, which actually one thing, and I guess this is necessary to mention, one thing is that the vaccine is available, and another thing is what are the vaccine patterns and how widely distributed it is, etc. I guess we are all aware of that. If we move to the second column, we can see how, in this case, there are either ticks or mosquitoes, so basically small insects, but there are also what I have called big animals. And in many cases, these big animals are involved and are part of the feeding in certain areas. If we move to the transmission mode, mainly we could say there are 2: transmission where the lungs are involved, either because the pathogen can be inhaled or because the transmission is through respiratory droplets, and then different animal bites. Of course, in this slide, we can see that there are tick bites, mosquito bites, and also in the case of the rabies, animal bites. The options to prevent the bites from ticks or mosquitoes are much more limited as compared to the animal bites for the rabies. And if you see in the mortality rate, almost in all the cases, they are very, very high. And in the case of the rabies, almost the 100%. So it's actually something to take care of. And this is the second part of the table with all the remaining pathogens from the combination of all the lists. In this one, we can see how there are many more vaccines available. And again, the same thing, big animals involved, or also in this case, more proportion of humans involved in the transmission. And here we have in the transmission mode, transmission, so to say, via the lungs or animal bites, and two that are quite interesting, the fecal oral route for the case of the poliovirus, and in the case of the Vibrio cholerae, we have it's like something different because the transmission is through contaminated water. And here we can also see how most of these pathogens, they have very high mortality rates. So having given the background, we go and we move to the results. And in the results, we can see how and link was provided, so anyone could provide their feedback through an online survey. And in total, we gathered responses from 187 infectious diseases experts from 58 countries. The countries, they are colored in green, as you can see, and the darkest the green, the more participation from the respective countries. We have participants from all the continents. The methodology was actually, as a matter of fact, it was very simple, but still the information provided in the survey. A list of 14 pathogens and then space for another pathogen. Basically, it was an empty space where they could state different options that were concerning for the respective participant. They could rank them. They had the option to rank from only one, or they could include only one pathogen in the ranking, and they could add up to 15 pathogens. So, for example, let's say that the person participated and they ranked this way. They only ranked 5 pathogens and in this order. First, influenza, second, disease X, third, Ebola virus, fourth, Zika virus, and fifth, Nipah virus. Based on the order, a certain number of points were assigned, as you can see. And then we come here to the overall ranking of the analyzed pathogens. So we can see how the top 5 were influenza viruses, disease X, SARS-CoV-2, SARS-CoV-1, and Ebola virus. Here is important to mention that when we were asking for SARS-CoV-2, it was an additional pandemic or a different pandemic from the 2019, 2022, or 2023 one, okay? So we could see the ranking and we can see the overall or the percentage of total number of points that could be provided, how many were provided to each of the pathogens. But don't focus on that because there is a graphic in the next slide. It is interesting to see how influenza was voted as one of the concerning or the most concerning pathogens 147 times. Basically, the 80% of the participants thought that influenza was relevant at a certain point, always ranking between the first position and the 4th position. And then the other relevant pathogens or the other top pathogens, they were voted a bit less than 50% of the times. So now here we can see the percentage of the overall points obtained by the respective pathogen. This is what we have used, or these results are the ones we have used for making the final ranking, and we can see how 1/3 were of the overall points were to influenza viruses, 20% to disease X, then we have 15% for SARS-CoV-2, and then below the 10% we have SARS-CoV-1, Ebola virus, MERS-CoV, and Zika virus. And the rest of all the remaining pathogens, they made up to 13% of the votes. And we analyzed this, actually we did it in our discussion, why was the ranking in the way it was? Remember, influenza viruses, SARS-CoV-2, SARS-CoV-1, or actually influenza viruses, disease X, SARS-CoV-2, SARS-CoV-1, and Ebola virus. In this case, for influenza viruses and both SARS-CoV, the reasons are very similar. First one, because in the three cases, they have triggered previous pandemics. So basically, somehow, once they have done it once, well, the experts think they can do it again. The second one is the urban transmission. I mean, if you remember, and we don't really need to go many years back, it's something very recent with COVID-19 pandemic. It was, or one of the main measures was to cover our airways from the transmission. And also the speed of the viral mutations. In the case of SARS-CoV-2 is a bit faster as compared to influenza, but it's also good to remember that every year the influenza viruses change. So there is not a single or a unique virus, but there is somehow an update. And in both cases, and probably that's the reason why they were not included, because none of these viruses were included in the list of the WHO or the African CDC or even the CEPI. It's because there are vaccines available and there are treatments, but still they were being classified as concerning pathogens. And in this case, I have included in both cases an exclamation mark because it's a fun. There are vaccines available, but probably we should analyze which is the vaccination coverage. And then we have Ebola virus. I didn't write anything about disease X because, as I explained, disease X, it's somehow a synonym. One could say a fancier synonym to say unknown. And in the case of the Ebola virus, the main reason was the ones we can see in the slide. This virus was discovered in 1976 around the Ebola River in the well, back then the Belgian Congo. And since then, there have been up to, or actually almost 30 outbreaks. Why do we think that it's been considered like relevant? Because of one of the most recent outbreaks. Between 2013 and 2016, there was an outbreak that was especially concerning globally. And this was the case because citizens from Africa and were involved or were infected, from outside Africa were involved. And actually, those cases were even transferred out of Africa. And also because it's one of the pathogens in the lists I showed you with the highest mortality rates. And here we have, well, actually like an internal concern, an internal discussion, whether in case more African institutions would have participated, the Ebola virus would have raised or would have marked higher. And with this, I come to the conclusions, which are basically what I have already mentioned some way. Influenza viruses, SARS-CoV-1, SARS-CoV-2, Ebola virus are found to be the most concerning pathogens with pandemic potential. Also, we mentioned disease X, but again, basically it's that like answering, I don't know. And then the ranking has been influenced by the transmissibility through respiratory droplets, as it is the case in all those viruses, and also the reported history of epidemic or pandemic outbreaks. In the right, you have the publication, and I invite you to check on it or check for it on PubMed to get all the all the full details. And I would like to finish acknowledging and giving the thanks to all the participants in this survey. And of course, to you for being here now with us.
Thank you very much, John. Actually, it is a very interesting study. both actually the ranking process, but also the reasoning, I think, very, very important. Before asking from my side a few questions, I would like to ask the audience if you have any comment or question with regards to the VACCELERATE study. Please, you can write it down in the chat room, as Zanina also mentioned earlier, or you can raise your hand and ask your question, or just comment on the publication and the survey directly. So do we have any comments or questions? Okay. So the first one is, could we please see the names who participate in the survey again? I could not see my team. So it is from Efrosini, just a comment, John, I'm sure if it was feasible to write down all the names in a slide.
Yes, actually they are even available in the, I'm sharing again my screen. They are even available in the publication, because basically, well, like all the participants were acknowledged with a collaborator status, and then the ones that were involved more actively in the writing process were, do appear as authors.
Yes, Jean, I think definitely we have already informed the whole, let's say, participants about the publication, and also about the great interest that also I think the Guardian Journal presented with regards to this survey. And please correct me, but you have also presented this study, of course, acknowledging all the contributions to the latest ESCMID meeting, as far as I know.
Yes, exactly. In the last meeting, it was selected as a poster.
Thank you very much. And actually, I see a second question, which is also related with what I had in mind from Raymond. What about avian influenza? And I think this is a very, very hot topic also based on the results, most probably, Jean, and I think you will explain that by asking about influenza, it included both human and avian subtypes and influenza types. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at the end, in influenza, we were asking about all the influenza and influenza viruses. And I guess the concern comes from the cases kind of recently reported in the US and in Mexico. The data were collected between 2022 and 2023. So those, in case the question goes in that direction, that concerning or the concerning for that outbreak is not somehow included in this analysis. But yes, with influenza, we were referring to all the influenza viruses in humans, of course.
Yeah, but there is actually a great interest and a blooming, let's say, topic currently when it comes to the avian influenza subtypes and the sporadic cases that we have seen recently also in humans. And this is also maybe another point to mention or emphasize how important it is actually when we refer about pandemic preparedness and future pathogens to have a more holistic, let's say, approach and surveillance systems. Let me check if we have any other comment or question. So from my side, also, Zona, I would like to comment or ask you, I think you mentioned also during the methodology with a very nice table that you provided to us, how important it is to have preventable tools, vaccines, when it comes to future pathogens that can cause significant outbreaks or pandemics. And specifically for the influenza, let's say, pillar, it is very important to discuss further about the pandemic preparedness when it comes to vaccines, when we refer not to human vaccines, but also to other types, as we just mentioned. So just a comment from my side, that it's very important thing to prioritize based on the survey and see what could be the next steps, discussing with the relevant stakeholders and organizations, of course.
Yeah, actually, it's a very relevant topic, and the concern regarding vaccine hesitancy is rising quite a lot, and not only on the general population, but also on the healthcare practitioners. Here in our group in Cologne, we have made a couple of studies based on that, and we could see how even if certain healthcare professionals were working in direct contact with immunosuppressed patients, still they were hesitating whether to take the vaccine or not. I mean, of course, in principle, for the healthcare workers, like directly for their health, mightn't be a big problem, although there could be room for discussion, because in case you have like a bit stronger influenza episode, well, you will be suffering. There will be some days you are not going to work. So at the end, like there are many different perspectives to analyze whether the vaccination is necessary. But at the end, the people that will probably suffer from that are the immunosuppressed patients you might be treating. So at the end, it's not just the concern or an inner responsibility, but also the responsibility with our environment.
John, I couldn't agree more. And adding on that, if you recall, the coordination office has actually, let's say, completed a workshop last year in Cologne. And we were trying also with experts to discuss further about this issue, including vaccine confidence, but also confidence when it comes to vaccine trials and studies, which is another very, very important topic, because this is the reason why I said that we need, based on these results, to discuss further with the relevant stakeholders and organizations, because we need to be better prepared also during this interpandemic period, also for vaccine trials and studies.
Mm-hmm.
We have two additional actually comments and questions. The first one is by Zen. The CDC Africa list was rather different and actually included more pathogens.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate a bit on the reasons for that?
Yes, actually, the list from the African CDC was by far the longest one. And if you, well, I don't know whether you had time to check very on detail on it, but I mean, in our publication, you will find the link to the African CDC list. Most of the pathogens were pathogens from or with an African perspective, basically pathogens that are worrisome locally in Africa. And probably since the VACCELERATE list was made from a more global perspective and not that continental, because like local, I wouldn't say it makes sense, that it's the difference. But yes, I mean, like most of the pathogens there are actually somehow, like whenever you are doing a trip to Africa or so to some tropical areas, like pathogens, you would need to
John, I think we lost you for just a second at the end, or is it my?
Yeah, what I was saying is that basically the African CDC list was indeed the longest one, and it was made with a very African continental perspective, because many of those viruses you cannot really find in anywhere beyond Africa. And for example, in this case, I mean, I'm based in Germany, so from our European perspective, you would think of them mainly if you have a person that or a patient that is traveling to those areas. But I mean, otherwise, I mean, in Europe, for example, we don't really get yellow fever, either vaccine as a normal vaccine, or there are not really cases of yellow fever infections unless it's normally a patient or a person coming back from an endemic area. So basically, it's like really targeted to endemic infections.
And actually, maybe this is also the added value of having such a study where we actually tracked experts from 57 countries, because it's very important to track, first of all, the perceived risk locally, but also at an international level, because it is actually a cross-border threat, but it's important to have also the local data and perceived risks, I think. And we have also another, let's say, question by Lily. Can the VACCELERATE site provide a quick ranking of new, concerning, or interesting emerging pathogens that are not listed on the list that you mentioned earlier?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, actually, I think it's a very interesting question and suggestion. Personally, what I would suggest is to raise that research idea to VACCELERATE so it can be discussed internally, although it's true that sometimes, well, like since the cases in like the global north are limited, maybe even certain infectious diseases physicians may have problems to rank them. But I mean, I think it's a very interesting challenge and, well, also an awareness process. And related to that, I would like to mention that similar initiatives and like flash surveys have been performed already within VACCELERATE Site Network. For example, when there was the Mpox outbreak of 2022 out of Africa, not targeting children, but adult patients. Within the VACCELERATE Site Network, we already contacted our sites and we look for their capacity. So basically, there are many research questions that can be answered through or via the VACCELERATE Site Network. So I would like to invite you, not only Mrs. Anderson-Lee, but also anyone that in case you have any kind of this research question, well, feel free to drop us some lines.
And actually, Jean, it's very important also to emphasize that the network is actually responding very quickly. So if I recall correctly, when it comes to the Mpox outbreak, the coordination office responded in a few days by preparing actually the online survey and by receiving the responses, which is another very important point to, in a way, sustain this kind of... Sorry, Carolina, if you can mute yourself. Yeah. I was saying that also for pandemic preparedness regions, it is very important to sustain this kind of networks like the VACCELERATE network, because we realized during the last, especially during the last 4 years, that the situation is pretty much dynamic when it comes to emerging infectious diseases and outbreaks. So I think this is another point that we need to emphasize, and of course we need to further support. Another, let's say, comment by Angela is, have you any data regarding the impact of ongoing, let's say, studies on ranking new concerning pathogens? I think it's pretty much what we are discussing now. If you would like to comment.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that's a very interesting topic. But we didn't really focus on the on the role of wars in ranking one pathogen over the other, basically because these are like infections that have been normally reported. So even if there were no wars, so to say, the infections were still there. But definitely it's a very big or a very interesting topic, because at the end, with the wars, well, probably you may force the population to modify their feeding and maybe take some animals instead of.
I think we lost for a few seconds, Jean again. But adding actually on what just Jean mentioned, I fully agree. Please, Angela, keep in mind that the VACCELERATE consortium is a purely, let's say, currently pan-European scientific consortium with expertise on vaccine trials and studies. And of course, there are several reasons, including wars, most importantly, globalization per se, that could impact actually the presence and the evolution of new concerning pathogens at the global level. So we didn't, let's say, further deepen the reasons for having, let's say, a ranking based on the possible, let's say, reasons for causing these concerning pathogens. But it would be nice, as you suggested, to further analyze and discuss with the experts about the impact on several reasons and concerning pathogens. So
sorry, I'm back. I lost the connection.
Yes,
yeah. So yeah, basically, what I was saying related the question on the involvement of words or the role of words. I think it's a very interesting topic, and in certain aspects with certain pathogens, it has already been described. Not really because of the war per se, but like because of the the injuries from war, also the movement of people in the case of fungal infections by desertic areas. So at the end, you are more in contact with the nature, etc. So yeah, I mean. Again, I mean, like if you would like to do that within or with the help of the VACCELERATE consortium, I think it could be a very interesting opportunity, and please feel free to reach us anytime.
Yeah, that's a very important point, John, that we are always open for suggestion as a VACCELERATE consortium. And this was evident also during the last 3.5 years for new suggestions, actually, in collaborations. And maybe it would be interesting to see over the next period if there are some changes when it comes to the perceived risks of the experts, because as I said, things are dynamic, so we could eventually repeat this kind of study or a similar study next year, adding some, let's say, additional, let's say, information about, let's say, the causes and impact, as Angelo suggested. Any other comments or questions? John, I would like to go back once again to the vaccine, let's say, part of the study. I think it would be nice, again, as a future suggestion, to deepen our knowledge about the existing vaccines and maybe the vaccines that are at their latest phase of assessment in a way that are directly related with the specific ranking of pathogens with pandemic potential, because sometimes even for me it's very difficult to see where are we currently when it comes to vaccine development or existing vaccines and indications, etc. Again, directly related with these pathogens. I think it would be very important for all of us.
Yes, and actually, probably in that case, I'm biased because one of my projects is the access to treatment and diagnostics in fungal infections. But I do see that how one thing is that there are treatment tools or diagnostic tools available, and another different thing is what is the real access to those tools. So I think there is also like quite room for improvement in there, and well, I mean, at the end, we can see, for instance, with poliovirus, how the vaccine exists for so many years, but still we are struggling to get rid of it at the global level.
So of course, vaccine acceptance and vaccination and vaccine studies is very important, but also vaccine development, production, and access is also another very important point, which is actually also emphasized by all organizations, including WHO, when it comes to pandemic preparedness, because this is, I think, the major, let's say, concern now. How can we, I mean, at a global level, be better prepared in case a new pandemic comes for, let's say, prevention tools, mainly vaccines and vaccine research. I think this is what VACCELERATE is also trying to support in a way as a scientific consortium. And I think at the pan-European level, it is very important to keep actually these discussions, these collaborations, again, at a global level, because it's really very important to focus on these topics now during the interpandemic period. So from that sense, I have the feeling that as you presented also at the beginning of this VACCELERATE survey, it's very, very important to keep in contact and discuss about these topics, because I have the sense that after the crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic, there is less and less interest when it comes from the relevant stakeholders, local authorities, European authorities. And we, I mean, as a scientific consortium, should keep on pressuring in a nice way about the importance of having data, of having research, high quality research, and European and international collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I fully agree with you.
Actually, I don't know if we have any other comment or question. Otherwise, I think that, Zon, as you mentioned, the article is already published and available. Mm-hmm. We have also the Guardian journal article. And I think that we are all, and of course, the coordination office, open for any future suggestion related with pandemic preparedness and vaccine research.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, actually, not only the VACCELERATE Site Network, but the whole VACCELERATE consortium is open to any proposal and idea you may come with. So yes, just feel free to use the already set infrastructure for, well, getting the solutions or answering the research questions you may have.
That's great. Then also from my side, I would like to thank, first of all, Zon, for this excellent, again, presentation. The whole, let's say, all of you that you attended to the VACCELERATE webinar and the consortium, and I would like to give the floor to Zanina to close officially the meeting for today, the webinar for today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Zoe. Thank you, John, for this very exciting talk. Thank you very much, Zoe, for your help with the moderation. Thanks for you, the participants, for joining us today. Special thanks to everyone who filled out the survey and made this investigation possible. The VACCELERATE webinars are going into the summer break now. The next one will most likely take place in September, and we will, of course, provide you with the invitation. I wish you all a great day today, a nice summertime. Bye-bye, and see you in the next webinar.